You're watching Forgotten Civilization, where history's lost stories rise from the dust. Each week we uncover the ancient civilizations that time tried to erase. Subscribe and join us as we reveal the secrets of our forgotten world. The Hohokam Civilization, masters of the desert. Before the towering cities of America, before the great mounds and cliff dwellings, there were the Hohokam, a people who tamed one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. Deep in the Sonoran Desert of what is now Arizona, the Hohokam built a civilization that flourished for nearly 1,500 years. Imagine it, a world of searing heat, little rainfall, and endless sand. Yet somehow, they made it bloom. Their name, Hohokam, given by later native peoples, means those who vanished. But long before they disappeared, they transformed the desert into a miracle of human ingenuity. Archaeologists believe their story began around 300 BC, perhaps earlier, when small bands of farmers began to settle near the Gila and Salt rivers. At first glance, it seemed impossible to build a thriving community in such an arid wasteland. But the Hohokam were not just survivors, they were innovators. They engineered vast irrigation canals, some stretching more than 20 miles long, bringing life-giving water from the rivers to their fields. These canals were not primitive ditches, they were complex systems, carefully sloped to carry water across miles of desert without losing a drop. Even modern engineers marvel at their precision. As the centuries passed, their villages grew into towns and cities. The Hohokam cultivated corn, beans, squash, and cotton, the lifeblood of their economy. Their cotton, spun into fine threads and woven into cloth, became a trade treasure across the Southwest. They traded shells from the Pacific, turquoise from New Mexico, and exotic macaws from Mexico, proof that their network reached far beyond Arizona. But their achievements were not only practical, they were also spiritual. The Hohokam built ball courts like those in Mesoamerica, suggesting contact with ancient Mexican cultures. These courts weren't just for games, they were for ceremony, diplomacy, and perhaps even religion. In their art, we find striking parallels to civilizations thousands of miles away. Pottery painted with red and buff designs, intricate jewelry, and carved stone idols all tell of a society rich in symbolism. Beneath the desert sun, their world thrived. Green fields along dusty rivers, homes of adobe and caliche, and watchtowers that stood guard over farmlands. At its height around 1150 AD, the Hohokam population may have reached over 40,000, one of the largest prehistoric populations north of Mexico. Their largest city, Snaketown, was a bustling hub of trade and culture. Here, canals snaked through the land, feeding crops that sustained entire generations. But for all their success, one mystery remained. How could a civilization so advanced, so deeply rooted in their environment, simply vanish? The story of the Hohokam is not just about the rise of a civilization. It is also about its sudden and silent end. Why did they disappear? Drought, warfare, disease, or something deeper? Something that even modern science can't fully explain? In the burning heart of Arizona, the ruins of their canals still lie beneath our feet, silent, patient, waiting for someone to remember. The Hohokam were not just desert dwellers. They were masters of adaptation, proof that human brilliance can flourish even in the harshest corners of the earth. And yet, their legacy, like the rivers they tamed, eventually ran dry. The desert engineers, building America's first canals. In the blazing heart of the Sonoran Desert, where the ground cracks under the sun's fury and rain is a rare blessing, the Hohokam achieved something no other people in North America had done before them. They built rivers where none existed. Their legacy wasn't carved in stone temples or towering monuments, but in the intricate arteries of life they engineered through barren lands, canals, ditches, and reservoirs that carried water across impossible distances. To this day, many of those ancient channels remain beneath the soil of modern Arizona, silently tracing the paths that once sustained a civilization. The Hohokam were not merely farmers, they were hydrologists, engineers, and visionaries. At a time when Europe was still in the Dark Ages, They had already mastered water control on a grand scale. Their main settlements, like Snaketown and Pueblo Grande, sat along the Gila and Salt rivers. From these sources, the Hohokam dug canals as wide as modern highways and as deep as a man's height. Some extended over 20 miles, branching off into smaller veins that fed farmland stretching across the valley. They controlled the slope of each canal with astonishing precision. Too steep, and the water would erode the banks. Too shallow, and it would stagnate. Archaeologists today estimate they moved millions of tons of earth by hand, with tools of wood, stone, and bone. These canals didn't just water crops, they sustained life. Corn, beans, squash, and cotton grew in the once barren desert, transforming Arizona into a green belt of abundance. It was a miracle of human ingenuity, a testament to persistence and adaptation. When floods came, the Hohokam built diversion dams to regulate flow. When drought threatened, they deepened channels and widened banks. Their survival depended on the rhythm of water, and so did their spiritual life. To the Hohokam, water was sacred, a divine force connecting earth and sky. Ceremonies and rituals likely revolved around rainmaking and fertility, and the canals themselves may have held symbolic importance beyond their practical use. The success of their irrigation system brought prosperity, and with it, expansion. Villages grew into city-states. Snaketown became a central hub, surrounded by satellite settlements connected by canals and trade routes. But their influence didn't stop there. Artifacts show that the Hohokam traded with distant cultures, turquoise from New Mexico, shells from the Gulf of California, copper bells, and even macaw feathers from Mexico. These exchanges suggest they were part of a vast network that reached into Mesoamerica, where the great civilizations of the Toltecs and Maya flourished. The similarities in ball courts and iconography hint that they not only traded goods, but also shared ideas and beliefs. Some archaeologists believe Hohokam engineers might have even influenced later canal systems built by other tribes in the American Southwest. Their techniques were so advanced that when European settlers arrived centuries later, they reused the very same canals, the bones of an ancient infrastructure still pulsing with life. Modern Phoenix, Arizona, owes much of its early agricultural success to these ancient waterways, which were rediscovered and restored in the 19th century. Without the Hohokam, the region may never have supported large-scale settlement. But progress comes with pressure. As the population grew, so did the demand for water and fertile land. The Hohokam had to constantly maintain and expand their network. Overuse could turn soil saline. Silt could choke the canals. The delicate balance they had maintained for centuries began to strain under its own success. Yet, for 1,000 years, they endured, a civilization built not on conquest or empire, but on mastery over nature itself. The Hohokam stand as America's first engineers. Long before the arrival of European architects, they were designing hydraulic systems that rivaled anything in the ancient world. And as we walk today through the sun-baked valleys of Arizona, beneath the asphalt and irrigation lines, their ancient channels still whisper through the earth. The remnants of a people who once commanded rivers from stone and sand. The spiritual world of the Hohokam, gods, rituals, and sacred symbols. Beneath the relentless desert sun, where survival depended on every drop of water and every harvest from the dry soil, the Hohokam developed a worldview deeply intertwined with nature, a spiritual system as intricate as the canals they built. For the Hohokam, the earth was alive, the rivers were sacred veins, and the sky was a realm of gods and ancestors watching from above. Every sunrise, every storm, every shift in the wind carried meaning. To live in harmony with such an unforgiving environment, they believed, required more than skill. It required balance, reverence, and constant communication with the spiritual world. At the heart of Hohokam religion stood the concept of duality, water and fire, sun and rain, life and death. Archaeologists believe they saw themselves as stewards of the desert, tasked with keeping these forces in equilibrium. The canals they carved were not just physical achievements. They were spiritual channels connecting their people to divine power. To the Hohokam, water symbolized life itself, a gift from supernatural beings who controlled rain and fertility. When floods threatened their fields, It was not simply a natural disaster, but a sign that balance had been broken. And so they turned to ceremony, ritual dances, offerings, and prayers meant to restore harmony. Their sacred sites were often built near water or atop elevated mounds. Some of these mounds, found near major settlements like Snaketown and Pueblo Grande, served as platforms for temples or the homes of spiritual leaders. It was here that priests or shamans performed rituals that might have dictated planting seasons or celebrated the harvest. Archaeological evidence reveals that fire pits and ceremonial objects, turquoise amulets, shell jewelry, and carved stone effigies, were central to these gatherings. The Hohokam may not have had written language, but through their art, they told stories of their gods and myths. Their pottery, among the most exquisite in ancient North America, wasn't merely decorative, it was symbolic communication. Painted in shades of red, cream, and black, many vessels depict serpents, birds, and other natural motifs believed to represent water spirits or deities. The snake, in particular, appears frequently, perhaps symbolizing the life-giving rivers or the cycle of renewal. Spirals, another recurring design, might represent water flow or the journey of life and death. Each motif carried meaning, each stroke a prayer. But perhaps the most intriguing expression of their spirituality lies in their ball courts, oval-shaped arenas dug into the desert earth. Nearly 200 have been found across the Hohokam territory. These were not mere places of sport, they were stages of ritual significance. The game played within these courts likely symbolized the eternal struggle between life and death, fertility and drought, order and chaos. The courts themselves bear striking resemblance to those in Mesoamerica, where the ball game was deeply tied to religion and sacrifice. The similarities raise compelling questions. Did the Hohokam share cultural roots with civilizations like the Maya or the Toltecs? Were traders from the south bringing not only goods but beliefs, rituals, and myths that blended into the Hohokam way of life? Their connection to the heavens was equally profound. The alignment of some Hohokam structures, especially mounds and petroglyphs, suggests astronomical knowledge. They may have tracked solstices and equinoxes, marking the cycles that governed agriculture. Petroglyphs etched into desert rock show suns, stars, and cosmic spirals, which might have served as calendars or spiritual markers. To the Hohokam, the cosmos and the earth were one. The stars mirrored the rivers below, and their lives were written in both. Spiritual life also extended into death. Burials reveal careful treatment of the dead, often accompanied by pottery, tools, and ornaments. Some scholars believe cremation was practiced, symbolizing purification by fire, another element of duality that defined their world. These customs show a belief in an afterlife or a continuation of existence beyond the mortal realm, perhaps in the flowing waters or the shifting sands. The Hohokam spirituality was not grand in architecture like the pyramids of Egypt, nor written in stone like the Maya, but it was deeply human, a faith rooted in survival, gratitude, and respect for the delicate balance that sustained them. They lived not as conquerors of the desert, but as its caretakers, harmonizing their lives with the rhythm of the land and sky. And yet, as centuries passed and their world began to change, even faith could not hold back what was coming. The balance they had kept for over a millennium was faltering. The rivers that once gave life began to turn against them. Their gods, it seemed, had grown silent. The fall of the Hohokam, drought, collapse, and disappearance. For more than 1,000 years, the Hohokam had tamed the Sonoran Desert, transforming barren land into an oasis of canals, farms, and villages that pulsed with life. Their ingenuity had turned the dry heart of Arizona into one of ancient America's most productive regions. But even the greatest civilizations are not immune to time, change, and the wrath of nature. Around the mid-13th century, something began to unravel in the world of the Hohokam. Slowly, quietly, but with an inevitability that would end centuries of balance. At first, the signs were subtle. The great rivers, the Gila and the Salt, upon which the Hohokam depended, began to shift course. The floods that once nourished their canals became more violent and unpredictable. Droughts stretched longer, harvests grew smaller. To the Hohokam, whose entire world revolved around water, this wasn't just a challenge, It was an existential threat. The people who once believed they had mastered the desert were now at its mercy. Archaeologists studying sediment layers along ancient canals found evidence of prolonged droughts, interspersed with catastrophic floods around the 1200s and 1300s. These environmental shocks struck at the heart of the Hohokam system. Their intricate network of irrigation channels, spanning hundreds of miles, relied on a delicate balance of river flow. When that balance broke, the entire system began to collapse. Canals silted up, riverbanks eroded, and the once prosperous farmlands turned to dust. But nature alone does not tell the whole story. There are signs that internal social strains were also mounting. As resources dwindled, competition likely grew fierce among the Hohokam communities. Some archaeologists believe that disputes over water rights, crop distribution, or leadership could have led to tension and conflict. Evidence of fortified settlements from the late Hohokam period, something previously unseen in their history, suggests a shift from peaceful coexistence to defensive posturing. The people who had thrived on cooperation were now turning inward, protecting what little they had left. Cultural changes also became evident in their artifacts and settlements. The magnificent red-on-buff pottery that had once defined Hohokam artistry began to disappear, replaced by simpler, less ornate designs. Ball courts, once the centers of spiritual and social life, fell out of use. Large public structures were abandoned or left unfinished. The rhythms of ceremony and community that had unified the Hohokam for generations seemed to fade into silence. Something fundamental had broken within their world. Perhaps faith, perhaps leadership, or perhaps the will to endure the mounting hardships. And then there were the floods. Around 1350, the Salt River is believed to have unleashed devastating torrents that washed away fields, homes, and entire canal systems. These weren't the nourishing floods of old. They were destructive and final. Villages that had stood for centuries were buried under mud and debris. Those who survived were left with little choice but to move, abandoning their ancestral homes, their canals, and the land that had sustained them for over a millennium. Some migrated northward or eastward, seeking refuge in cooler regions or merging with neighboring tribes. Others may have followed the rivers downstream, hoping to find new land to cultivate. Oral traditions among later indigenous peoples, such as the Pima and Tohono O'odham, speak of ancient ancestors who once built great canals and lived in vast settlements before disappearing into the desert. To these descendants, the Hohokam were not lost. They were transformed, absorbed into new cultures, carrying fragments of their knowledge and spirit into future generations. What caused the final blow remains debated among scholars. Was it an unstoppable climate shift, a breakdown of social cohesion, disease, or conflict? Perhaps it was all of these combined, a convergence of crises that overwhelmed even the most resilient people. The desert, once their ally, had turned into an unforgiving adversary. By the time Spanish explorers arrived in the 1500s, the once bustling cities of the Hohokam were silent ruins. The canals lay buried beneath layers of sand, and the plazas where festivals and rituals once echoed had become ghostly reminders of a vanished world. Nature had reclaimed the land, erasing nearly every trace of human mastery. Yet the bones of their civilization, the faint lines of canals, the shards of pottery, the mounds of Snaketown and Casa Grande, still whisper their story to those who listen. Perhaps the Hohokam didn't truly vanish at all. Perhaps they simply adapted, their descendants surviving in new forms, new places, under new names. The Pima people, who later inhabited the same region, told stories of their ancestors' great canal builders. They spoke of floods, of hunger, of the end of an age. These oral traditions echo too closely to be coincidence. The spirit of the Hohokam may live on, not in the ruins of their cities, but in the memories and traditions of the desert's later inhabitants. And so the once thriving civilization that mastered the desert, that carved rivers through sand and built cities without stone, came to a quiet end. The desert reclaimed what was once its own, and the great canals that had given life now serve as archaeological veins carrying stories of ingenuity, resilience, and ultimate fragility. The Hohokam had achieved what few thought possible. They had made the desert bloom, but even they could not escape the cycles of nature, the passage of time, or the shifting balance that governs every civilization. Their disappearance serves as both a warning and a legacy, a reminder that human progress, no matter how advanced or harmonious, is always at the mercy of the natural world. The canals of the Hohokam, now dry and buried, are not just remnants of the past. They are mirrors reflecting our own world's struggle between creation and collapse. Rediscovery and legacy. The Hohokam's echo in modern America. Centuries after the last Hohokam canals dried and their cities fell silent beneath the desert sun, the story of these ancient engineers might have been lost forever, erased by sand, time, and memory. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a new kind of explorer began to rediscover their world. Archaeologists, settlers, and scientists stumbled upon strange mounds, pottery fragments, and faint canal lines etched into the desert floor near modern-day Phoenix. What they found would transform not only our understanding of pre-Columbian America, but also the very identity of the American Southwest itself. When early settlers arrived in Arizona in the 1800s, they noticed peculiar trenches snaking across the land, vast channels that seemed too perfect, too engineered to be natural. Some were over 20 feet wide and ran for miles. Curious farmers soon realized these ancient canals could still carry water. They began to clear them, to reuse them, breathing life back into systems built 1,000 years earlier by hands long turned to dust. These settlers had unknowingly revived the irrigation legacy of the Hohokam, a direct link between ancient ingenuity and modern American agriculture. As archaeologists began to study the region more deeply, a picture of the Hohokam Civilization began to emerge, one of intelligence, adaptability, and complexity. Sites such as Snaketown, Casa Grande, and Pueblo Grande revealed an intricate society that had mastered desert living centuries before European contact. The Hohokam's irrigation networks became the focus of awe. Nearly 500 miles of canals, built without metal tools, powered machinery, or beasts of burden. Using only stone, wood, and determination, they sculpted a hydraulic civilization that rivaled the engineering feats of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. In the early 1900s, archaeologists like Frank Midvale and Harold Gladwin conducted detailed excavations that unearthed layers of Hohokam history, from the earliest pit houses to the great platform mounds and ceremonial centers of their later years. These discoveries revealed a civilization deeply connected to the cycles of nature, one that had developed advanced knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and hydrology. The Hohokam were not a primitive people scraping by in the desert. They were visionaries who understood how to live in balance with a harsh and unforgiving environment. One of the most striking revelations was the Hohokam's cultural and spiritual life. The ball courts, platform mounds, and plazas spoke of a society rich in ceremony and community. Archaeologists believe these structures were centers for festivals, rituals, and astronomical observations, marking solstices, harvests, and cosmic events. The Hohokam had a profound understanding of their place in the universe, expressed not through towering monuments, but through harmony with the natural rhythms of the desert sky. Yet perhaps the greatest legacy of the Hohokam lies not just in their ruins, but in their influence on the modern American Southwest. The city of Phoenix, one of the fastest-growing metropolitan areas in the United States, literally rises upon the foundations of Hohokam civilization. Many of its current canals follow the exact paths carved by the ancient ones. In fact, the very name Phoenix was chosen because the city was seen as rising from the ashes of the old Hohokam world, a symbolic rebirth of an ancient land of water and sun. Modern engineers and archaeologists have marveled at how accurately the Hohokam designed their irrigation system. Some canals had gradients so precise that even with today's technology, recreating them would be a challenge. Their understanding of water flow, pressure, and terrain was so advanced that it continues to inform modern hydrological studies. The Hohokam were not simply farmers. They were scientists, architects, and environmental engineers far ahead of their time. But rediscovery also came with reflection and caution. As Arizona's population exploded in the 20th and 21st centuries, its cities began to face the same challenges that may have doomed the Hohokam: water scarcity, over-reliance on rivers, and ecological imbalance. The canals that once symbolized triumph over the desert are now reminders of humanity's delicate relationship with nature. Many scientists and historians see the Hohokam's fall not just as an archaeological mystery, but as a warning to modern civilization, that even the most brilliant systems can fail when the environment is pushed too far. Today, the legacy of the Hohokam is preserved in museums, archaeological parks, and cultural centers throughout Arizona. Places like the Casa Grande Ruins National Monument and the Pueblo Grande Museum serve as gateways into their world. Visitors walk among the remnants of ancient walls, peer into pit houses, and trace the dry channels where water once flowed. Each step reconnects them to a civilization that, though silent, still speaks through the earth itself. Native tribes in the region, including the O'odham peoples, the Tohono O'odham and Akimel O'odham, continue to honor the memory of the Hohokam as their ancestors. Their oral traditions tell of the ancient canal builders, of floods and famine, and of migration. To them, the Hohokam are not a vanished people, but part of a living lineage, their spirit alive in every story, ceremony, and grain of desert soil. The word Hohokam itself, derived from the O'odham language, means those who have gone, a name that acknowledges both their disappearance and their eternal presence in memory. In recent years, advanced technologies like LiDAR and aerial photography have unveiled even more about the Hohokam world. Beneath modern Phoenix, archaeologists have identified traces of ancient fields, irrigation grids, and settlements stretching farther than once imagined. Each discovery deepens the realization that this civilization was not isolated or small. It was vast, organized, and enduring, an American counterpart to the great ancient societies of the Old World. But beyond their achievements in engineering or agriculture, what makes the Hohokam truly extraordinary is their resilience, their ability to create a sustainable civilization in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. For over a millennium, they balanced human need with environmental limits, thriving where others might have perished. Their story is not one of inevitable tragedy, but of remarkable endurance. As the sun sets over the Sonoran Desert today, the canals glisten faintly in the evening light, just as they did 1,000 years ago. The wind moves across the ruins, carrying whispers of the past, the rhythm of water, the echoes of festivals, the footsteps of the builders who turned dust into life. The Hohokam may be gone, but their spirit endures, a testament to human creativity, adaptability, and the timeless struggle to coexist with nature. Their story reminds us that civilizations are not defined by their fall, but by what they leave behind, by the lessons etched into the land and the inspiration carried forward by those who follow. The Hohokam's canals, still pulsing beneath the streets of modern cities, are veins connecting ancient and modern America, a living legacy of the first people who dared to master the desert and, in doing so, helped shape the soul of the American Southwest. And so, as we look upon the landscape they once ruled, we are reminded that beneath our feet lie the foundations of America's first great city builders. The Hohokam were not forgotten architects of the desert. They were America's first engineers of life, whose legacy flows, quite literally, through the heart of the nation they helped to shape. As the sun dips behind the jagged Arizona horizon and the desert falls silent, we're left to ponder. How many stories like the Hohokam's still lie buried beneath our feet? They were the masters of water in a land of fire, the engineers of life in a world of dust. Their canals still whisper beneath modern cities, a reminder that the roots of America's civilization run far deeper than we imagine. If you've enjoyed journeying with us into the heart of America's forgotten past, don't let this story fade into the sands of time. Subscribe to Forgotten Civilization, where we bring history's lost architects, hidden cities, and ancient mysteries back to life, one discovery at a time. Turn on notifications, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let us know which lost world you want to uncover next. Because every ruin has a voice, every artifact a story, and every forgotten civilization deserves to be remembered. This is Forgotten Civilization, unearthing the past to illuminate the truth.